Hi, Mbulelo Maigana from Mbulelo Conversations and Contemporary Conversations. I recently posted in one of the social media platforms that I have presence on a topic where I lamented the destruction of our nation and the emergence and the creation of a monster society that is not who we are as a nation, particularly the black community. And this is because of what I am saying and worried about in terms of what's happening in terms of our society. The number of things that are happening in our society that point to the fact that we are now a monster society. We are no longer a nation that has got a purpose, a nation that we can be proud of as we were before. I think prior to 1994, the black community was very united because they had a common purpose and a common enemy in the form of the apartheid government, and there was a common purpose in terms of eradicating the effects of apartheid and also removal of the then oppressive government, such that little, distracted us from that goal in terms of or purpose in terms of extricating ourselves from the shackles of apartheid. And I think in 1994, when we got democracy, we were all still united and we were all hopeful about our future as a society, and more especially as a black society in terms of um, making sure that we have better lives. And I mean, better lives for all, which is a slogan for one of the political parties that has failed dismally to actually deliver. But we all dreamt of a better life for all in terms of our society, such that we were all, in positive spirits that things are going to go well and things were okay. We were intact morally, socially, and otherwise. The only thing that we didn't have prior to apartheid and just after 1994 was economic power. But morally, we were a morally sound society and we were a united society. We were united in all forms, and we also had structures that assisted us and created social pressure that was necessary for us to actually be together and be united. I mean, if you look at the role that traditional leaders played, the role that church leaders played, it was crucial in terms of uniting us. If you look at traditional leaders, the same, for instance, as religious leaders, they were sort of a moral compass in terms of our communities, in terms of what is right and what is wrong. And we could rely on their leadership in terms of being able to guide the society, in terms of ensuring that we remain intact in terms of our morality and also in terms of our unity. I mean, if you look at traditional leaders, they played quite a crucial role in terms of rural areas and the areas that they were responsible for, in terms of guiding, communities and societies in terms of, behaviors and actions that were allowed and not allowed by the community, not by them as traditional leaders, because traditional leaders were, custodians of that which society wanted to uphold. The same in terms of religious leaders. Religious leaders were a buffer between communities and the oppressive regime of apartheid at that time, such that religious leaders were not scared to openly talk about, the evil that apartheid was, and also the wrong things that were happening as a result of apartheid. And we were all hopeful, therefore, that we would continue in that vein after 1994, that we will continue to build our society and also these structures that existed at that time, religious leaders and traditional leaders and other leaders in terms of the society would chart the way in terms of showing us how to sustain that which we have and also benefit from the democracy that we had just gotten into. I think the rot in terms of our society started once we had this freedom. We lost our sense of purpose as a society, and we wanted to emulate at all costs the lifestyle of our oppressors. We started to value and yearn for the lifestyle that was shown by our oppressors, such that we were willing to do anything possible to actually get that lifestyle. And that's where corruption started, where people could do anything possible so that they could perhaps emulate the life of their oppressors. And that's why, for instance, people moved even from townships, a number of them, to urban areas where you found them, sitting in homes with high walls, um, and electric fence to protect themselves from their fellow men, and particularly the black communities that they come from. And that's where the rot in terms of our society started. And we started creating a monster society, and we killed the well functioning black nation that we used to have. Now, I'm not a politician. I'm just a social commentator that talks about that which I see happening in terms of our society. Greed has sort of taken space in terms of our society, greed and corruption at all levels. It doesn't matter where you are, whether you are in church, whether you're in politics, or you are in corporates, or you just in society. Greed and corruption has taken space in terms of our society. And the role that used to be played by some of the people and the structures that I mentioned earlier on has sort of disappeared. The role that used to be played by traditional leaders has evaporated because now they are servants of the state. They are no longer servants of the people. They get paid by the state, and like I normally said, and also in another video that I did, where I said one does not bite the hand that feeds. So traditional leaders now, their agenda is to satisfy the state, is to satisfy that which the state wants, and even in terms of their utterances, therefore, they are not above politicians. They are below politicians. They are below councillors. They are below provincial leaders and national leaders in terms of stature, such that they lack that ability to lead communities. And communities no longer look up to them. And what has happened as a result of that? Then we have had a monster community or society creeping in terms of the areas that they are responsible for, or that they were responsible for, such that there are social ills that used not to happen in terms of areas that were ruled by traditional leaders that have now firmly entrenched themselves in terms of those communities. I mean, I can make an example: the use of drugs. The use of drugs has become very high in terms of rural areas that are ruled by traditional leaders, or so-called traditional leaders, such that there are secondary social ills that have cropped up now, where, for instance, you have these youngsters that are consuming drugs, you know, disassociating with reality and committing acts that are very shameful. You have most rural areas, elderly people that live by themselves. You have these young people that get into houses at night of these elderly people and do unthinkable things, that we've never seen in our lives, especially as a black community. I mean, recently there's a story in a place called Nongoma, where, for instance, you had a youngster that came into this house that had this old elderly lady that stayed by herself, and I believe that he was on drugs, and actually raped this old lady, while at the same time, asking her to perform oral sex on him, and also wanting his pension money, or the grant money that he gets from government. And the story that is narrated by this old lady in terms of what this young man asking this old lady to do, the sexual acts that he was asking this lady to do, and him, um, helping himself on this old lady, points to the fact that we have become a monster society where the elderly cannot be left to grow old in peace, but they have to be constantly afraid of the society that we have created. If you want to know more about the story that I'm talking about, go to my Facebook page and on my wall you will find the story Mulelo Maigana. Look at my Facebook page and you will see the story and you will hear what this lady says. And if you don't understand the language that she's using, please get someone that understands Zulu that can be able to translate for you. But we have created a monster society. Drugs have taken over. Young people no longer have guidance. Young people are desperate. There is a huge state of helplessness, amongst young people, because some of them, even when they graduate and get the necessary education, there are no jobs for them. And what do? I'm not saying this is an excuse. What do? They look for that which is going to help them deal with the stress and depression and disassociate with the reality that they're experiencing. And they get that from usage of drugs. And once they use these drugs, obviously, like I've mentioned earlier on, result in them committing atrocities that we actually do not want to see in terms of our society. So we've created a monster society. We have leadership in terms of our South African society that has completely failed the vision that was there, prior to 1994 and after 1994 when we got our democracy, in terms of leading us to light and also ensuring that we prosper as a society. The current leadership that we have and the leadership that we have at that time sold the soul of our society. Because you can't tell me that in a country like ours that is rich in minerals and abundant arable land, we have a situation wherein the majority of its citizens are still living in poverty. What has happened to the mineral resources that we have? We continue to support other people and other nations through these mineral resources, and there's little or no benefit to people, in the country, the poor people that we're looking up to our leaders to sort of help, uplift the standards of living in terms of our community. And instead, our people are continued to languish in poverty and all the social problems and social ills that we have. And in fact, we now have a situation wherein leaders in terms of our society have started to prey on the poor and the marginalized. If you look, for instance, one of the things that point to the fact that we've become a monster society is the inability of our leaders to care about the plight of poor people, and instead they use them as pawns in terms of their political aspirations. Because one of the things that is uppermost in terms of most politicians, if not all politicians that we have in terms of our country and in our societies, and by extension, even in Africa, is to be elected. And once they're elected, their preoccupation is to continue to be re elected at all costs, to the extent that they actually don't care as to what they do. If they have to trample on people's, spirits and souls, they will actually do that. And that is happening also in terms of our society. There is no society that thrives and grows economically when the majority of its citizens are at the peripheries of the economy, dependent on the state for social grants. This leadership that we have doesn't care for its people. There is no attempt to actually create conducive environments to ensure economic growth that is going to ensure that people can be able to work and help themselves. And this is also the type of leadership that has allowed the continued extraction of minerals, different types of rich minerals that we have as a country for the benefit of certain families and also companies that extract this to the benefit also of countries that are outside Africa, still leaving us languishing in poverty as communities in terms of Africa and also in terms of South Africa, to be specific, where I am talking from. So we've created a monster society. We used to be a united nation as black community, but we are a monster society that doesn't care, even for its young. We have a situation wherein we have elders that do not talk about the future of this country as it is supposed to be a future that we actually hand over to young people. Corruption and greed and being self-absorbed is one of the things that is killing us as a black community, and in particular the leadership that we've entrusted with the leadership of our communities. We are failing as a black nation. We're a monster society. We now have a number of social ills, things that we've never thought of because of the state that we find ourselves. There is an increase of situations where we actually do not value each other. We don't value human life. If you look, for instance, to what is happening in our country, and it's amazing that we don't value human life. There is an increase of a culture of hitmen or izenkabi in terms of our society, such that you find these assassinations now being posted also on social media. And when people see these posts on social media, they don't blink because this has become normalized in terms of our societies. Saying people being taken out, by a hitman, it is something that has been normalized in terms of our society. If you look, for instance, at the province of KwaZulu Natal, I'm not sure as to what is wrong in terms of that. That has become normalized and it has spread to other provinces where we have people that take up being a hitman as a profession, and they openly boast about this. That if that is not a sign of a monster society, I don't know as to what then is a sign of a monster society. Where killing another person is easy and you do that with no remorse, and the society where that is happening doesn't blink, doesn't even make noise about it, doesn't say not in our name, not in our presence, but people continue as usual as if nothing has happened. It's when only occasionally, when a well known person, a famous person, is assassinated, that maybe for that week people there will be rumblings around the fact that that person has been assassinated and people decrying the state of crime that exists. But after a week, people forget and continue with their lives as if nothing has happened. We have a proliferation of izingabi or hitman culture in terms of our society. And again, it comes from the fact that in terms of our society, we have lost direction. We don't have a sense of purpose as we used to have prior to 1994 because we had a common purpose as a black nation. We don't have that. Right now, we are a highly individualistic society that is preoccupied with greed, clout, and insatiable appetite for vanity and nice time, and that has completely destroyed us as a society. And I often wonder as to what kind of society will our grandkids kids inherit if we continue on this trajectory. Will they inherit anything in terms of the society that we would have left them? What about generations that come after that? We are a society that is ready for takeover, to be taken over by other societies that come from somewhere else. Because soon, these rich mineral resources that we have will be over because they are non renewable resources. At that time, what is it that we will have to show to generations and say, this is what we left you? We would not have built industries. We would not have been built economies that function for the benefit of generations to come. These are generations that I normally say will spit out at our graves and say, these were a bunch of useless people that created nothing for us but the challenges that we're facing. Whereas we were a good and functioning society during their time. Why didn't they work hard at ensuring that they create a society that works for us, a society that is able to sort of carry the baton and pass the baton of economic and social success to the next generation. So these are some of the things that I actually am just worried about in terms of our society that says we've destroyed our nation and instead we've created a monster society. And even in terms of relationships, we have destroyed our relationships by allowing people that want to peddle certain narratives to get into our homes and destroy them and say men, or say to women and men, you know what, the life that you're living is not the life that you're supposed to be living. And saying to women, be combative to your partners and make sure that you actually extricate yourself because they are oppressing you. Destroy. They, in the process, in terms of their narratives, also destroyed, the reputation and the stature of a man in terms of the society, of men in terms of society, and also in terms of families. And it's a well known fact that if you want to destroy a society, you first start by destroying the stature and the dignity of men or males in terms of their society, of that society, because by destroying the stature and the dignity um, of of males in terms of the society, then you destroy families, and families are a nucleus in terms of any society. And when you then destroy families, then that society is ripe for takeover because they are divided. You can be able to come and rule. It's a divide and rule, approach, and that's is happening in terms of our society, especially the black community. If you look as to how many societies no longer have a mother and a father, in terms of under the same roof raising their kids, and the strife that is there because of the single parenthood that is there, and the government coming over and taking over and say, we will give you social grants, depend on us, we will become your husbands. You have then women that are married to the state, no longer married to their husbands. Now, I'm not in any way saying that people should not get social grants if they are poor, but we can't have a situation wherein that becomes the modus operandi in terms of the state that says we will destroy, communities so that we can rule over them because we've divided families that are a nucleus in terms of communities and societies. We are a monster society. We're no longer a nation that can be proud of who we were prior to 1994 and just after 1994. We are continuing to destroy our society. We're a greedy society. We are a nation that doesn't care about what is happening. Now, the absence of unity also in terms of families is also outstanding. I mean, there's something that I saw recently on social media that made my blood boil in terms of how far we're willing to destroy our nation and create a monster society. There was something that was going around of someone that had created a post that says kids should sing when their parents are scolding and shouting at them and telling them how to behave. And say, when your parent is shouting at you, sing. Normalize singing when your parent is actually scolding and shouting at you and disciplining you. And I'm saying to myself, what has gone wrong with our society such that we can openly tell kids to defy their parents and actually do as they please and not listen to their parents and defy their parents by actually singing while their parents are trying to actually show them the way. That's how bad things have been in terms of us destroying our society and creating a monster society. There's an emphasis on rights without responsibility and accountability, in terms of everyone, in terms of our society, including kids that are growing up. We're breeding a nation that has got a huge sense of entitlement and that has no desire for hard work and also for to be held accountable. And the leadership that has colluded with companies and conglomerates to rape our country of its mineral resources is continue to doing that, and we have nothing to show. I mean, if you look at countries like Dubai, you have a situation wherein all citizens, are taken care of by the rich resources that they have, which is oil. We are richer than countries like Dubai, and yet we're very poor as a country. And that points to the type of leadership that we have. They've created a monster society wherein, for instance, we are always helpless and we're at each other's throats. Now, I think one of the things that we also need to look at is I sometimes wonder when our ancestors, look at us, what do they say? Are they not turning in their graves and saying, "What have you done to the country that we left you?" If you look, for instance, at reputable leaders that have passed on and left us with a functioning society, what are they saying in terms of what we have created? They are turning in their graves, and probably when we go and join them, they're going to be asking us as to what is it that you did, and actually look at us and spit on us and say, "You actually were a failure. You did not leave, a legacy for generations to come." We need to do something about this, South Africa. We need to wake up. We need to change things. This trajectory that we are actually on is not the one that is going to actually lead us to prosperity and prosperity for generations to come. We need to do something individually and collectively in our respective corners, in corporates, in homes, in communities, in families. We need to actually change things. We need to make sure that we reverse this monster that we have created and go back to the nation and the communities that we were supposed to have. We need to actually deal with these high levels of selfishness and individualism that exist in our societies. We need to sort of stem the tide in terms of this insatiable appetite that we have for vanity and pleasure, which is destroying our society. We also need to ensure that we help the youth not to self-destruct, because that's the route that they've taken, because they have not been able to sort of get the necessary guidance. We need to bring back the soul that we had as a community. Have people that walk around with amputated spirits because they've lost their identity. We have lost our identity as a community, and we cannot continue to let this continue in terms of our society. We have to get back to what we knew as a community, as a society and a nation that cares about its young, and that cares about its dignity, and that cares about the fact that we need to have a sense of purpose. Let's reverse this monster that we have created. And I want to challenge again the corporates to be part of this movement, individuals to be part of this movement, church leaders to be part of this movement, community leaders to be part of this movement, traditional leaders to be part of this movement to reverse what is happening in terms of our societies and communities, young people to be part of this movement, responsible political leaders to be part of this movement, and all of us as individuals in terms of our own capacities to be part of this movement to reverse this monster that we have created and go back to Ubuntu and create functioning communities and create a functioning society, if not for us, but for generations to come. Thank you.